Greetings, this is Mia. So today we're going to be talking about skunk symbolism. When we think about the skunk, we know that it's native, its roots are here in North America and also South America. It could be found. The skunk generally represents protection, setting boundaries, individuality, balance, courage, fearlessness, um, confidence, which is kind of synonymous in this way with boldness because the skunk is very bold. It knows its capabilities. It's also very adaptable, but it knows its capabilities and what it can do based off of the chemical that it releases from its anal glands called theo, which is basically a Greek word for sulfur. So when we think about that word, actually, we think about sulfur. Sulfur is actually something that you find in all living forms in life. The human body produces it. All of the planetary bodies produces it. The soil has sulfur. A lot of things have sulfur. So even waters, certain waters that you can go to, they have a specific smell. Specifically in Georgia, there's this Indian river spring, and that water actually contains high amounts of sulfur. And when you get the water, you can smell the sulfur. However, they say it's drinkable. So that's another story. But let's get back to this sulfur thing. Really interesting thing that I found is that sulfur is highly abundant in all forms of life, right? And apparently it plays a major role in redox homeostasis, which is a process when that refers to the endogenous capacity of cells to continuously deal with challenges and generate electrophiles are generally positive charged chemical species. So I thought that was really interesting because it really makes me think about life when we go through a lot of challenges. We kind of refocus people that are productive, that are highly productive, we refocus our energy into things that we can control, which produces positive results. And this actually is something that is happening internally in the system. So when we think about sulfur, we have this negative connotations. Also, when you think about the skunk, you have negative connotations. However, there's this duality and this challenge and this funky smell, like when life is giving you a funky smell, a bad taste in your mouth, experiences are giving you bad taste, like a bad feeling, bad vibes. It kind of gives you the opportunity to adjust and refocus on things that you can control, which is essentially positive, because those are the things that you can control, and that's where major changes can occur a lot of the times, especially when we talked about, even on the last video, when we are talking about the cat and duality, because this is another animal about duality because it has the white and the black symbol representing yin and yang, right? Or negative and positive as well. If we look at it in that way, negatively charged experiences versus positively charged experiences, and understanding that those are not to really be labeled good or bad. It's just energy. So the skunk can teach you about that duality just from understanding sulfur and how sulfur exists in life forms, and also how it exists in you, and looking at the physical connotations that that basic life experience. When you're going through challenges, you're trying to focus on things that you can control, refocusing your energy on things you can control. We're focusing on your energy of what is happening great in your life, instead of adding more erosion to your situation by focusing on the negative, which can be very difficult and is also a process that happens within and without being, like many different emotions, being depression and so on, so on, so on. So, yeah, so this is really amazing when we think about that. So that's the yin aspect. Also, when we look at the atomic number of sulfur, and just the fact that it has S, because we already talked about the letter S on the symbolism of the letter S. So if you did not watch the video on the letter S, I recommend you to go back and look at the letter S to have even a better understanding of sulfur's feminine principle, and how it kind of represents, erosion and death and things like that, and why there's so much negativity associated with the divine feminine, because there is a fear of death, whether that be mental, physical, or whatever form of death that actually happens. And also understanding that death does not mean that you do not have air. in your body or your temple or your physical vessel. It could be a death of a way of living and thinking. So anyway, going back to the fact that sulfur's atomic number is 16, which actually goes back to 7, and which actually is another thing of duality, because when I was looking into trying to draw a connection between the skunk's significance to planetary bodies, I realized that the skunk is actually involved in all of the planetary bodies because of this sulfur aspect. And then also the fact, which is more like, I mean, that's an active defense. So it's very active. It's very subtle because it stands in this still pose to make the perfect shot at its target. So it's like, active, but there's also a yin aspect to it because it's stillness in the process of its attack. So that means that it actually is highly intelligent as well. But going back to the 7, that's related to Libra, and Libra is all about the balance of things, the balance of life, which ties back into the black and white that the skunk displays and how it represents symbolically balance and duality, and also where not only it's also still and super cute and like minding its business, but once those boundaries are crossed, it gives you a warning sign in acrobatic forms, whether that be handstands and things like that, before it's about to shoot or shoot at its target to let them know, oh no, you need to back up or else. So there's this balance that it displays of like bitter and sweet, which we could say is cute versus angry because it's a cute animal, and also that you can see that the atomic number sulfur has that information in it as well. Because when we think about the letter 7, we think about Libra, we think about Libra rules over balance in general, law and order, contracts, which are related to law, and it also rules over relationships. And also when we think about that, the duality of keeping a good relationship with yourself and a good relationship with others around you, but having a balance in between both, whether you make sure that yourself is taken care of and also making sure that others are taken care of in the same fashion. And then when you look at the mirror sign across from Libra, the mirror sign, which is 180 degrees opposing Libra, would be Aries, which is about the self. So the self in relation to um, what is the relationship with self in relation to the outside world? How is the self understood and how does that ripple out into the outside world? And that's the mirror, that's the mysticism aspect of it that you guys like to use, when really it's just the science of self, which is a supernatural, which is not a spook word or a made up word that everybody likes to think. It's the word super and natural. So we need to look at things for what they are. So sometimes there's things that we may not understand without experience, of course, but also because our experience is relative to what we're seeing and feeling at that moment in time. So this is deep. The skunk is deep. Now, the reason why I was talking about the skunk representing individuality, because the skunk is usually by itself, unless it's mating or unless it's congregating to sustain colder climates with other skunks. So that's why it represents individuality, because it just really does its own thing. Another thing that's interesting, going back to the mating thing and the duality of things, the skunk mates in 2 seasons, late winter and early spring, hot and cold, yin and yang, back to duality again. So that pretty much covers everything, I think. The one last thing that I want to say about the skunk actually is that the reason why it's confident in its skills is because it knows its powers. It knows what it can do with that, with that feel, that sulfur that it releases onto others. It knows that when it's time to defend itself, when it comes time for it to defend itself, it's going to be effective. So that's why the skunk is so confident in its abilities to be able to do its own thing, but also knowing that when it's time to set boundaries and it's time to make those boundaries heard, the skunk, it knows how to do that. So this could be a great animal if you have trouble with boundaries, setting boundaries, if you have trouble understanding the duality of life, and you need to work towards that. This could be a power animal to work with and to further study. All right, that's it. Much love, much peace, and much fulfillment.